My name's Daniel, and I'm 34 years old. I work in mechanical engineering, but my real passion, the thing that actually makes me feel alive, is working with my hands. Welding, woodworking, engine repair, anything that lets me build something from scratch. Over the years, I built up my own personal workshop, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I started small when I was around 22, picking up used tools at estate sales, gradually investing in higher-end gear. MIG welder, lathe, drill press, precision clamps, custom tool chest, all of it funded from my own pocket, piece by piece, and housed in a converted shed on a small piece of land I inherited from my grandfather. The land wasn't much, just a patch behind my place, tucked away with enough space for the workshop and a gravel driveway. But it was sacred to me. That shed saw me through job losses, breakups, and every moment of clarity I ever found when life got loud. It wasn't just my retreat. It was the one place where I could hear myself think. Enter my cousin Shawn. Shawn and I used to be close. When we were kids, he was the cool older cousin by 3 years who let me tag along with his friends and introduced me to things like dirt bikes and engines. But somewhere along the line, somewhere between his second failed startup and his fourth temporary stay at someone else's house, he'd become the kind of guy who mistook generosity for obligation. And I was apparently his new target. It started innocently enough. About 6 months ago, Shawn messaged me out of the blue. "Yo, still got that workshop?" I hadn't heard from him in over a year. I said yeah, and he asked if he could come by sometime. I figured he just wanted to catch up, maybe tinker around for a day like old times. When he arrived, he looked rough, baggy eyes, wearing one of those graphic tees that's been washed too many times. But he was smiling wide, talking about how he had big plans and just needed a place to bring it all together. I didn't ask too many questions. I just opened the door and let him in. The first red flag was how quickly he made himself at home. Not just physically, but emotionally. He acted like he belonged. Walked right in, picked up one of my cordless drills, and said, "Man, this thing is sweet. Mind if I borrow it for a project next week?" Before I could answer, he was already loading it into his truck. At first, I let it slide. It's hard to say no to family, especially one that's clearly struggling. And truth be told, it was kind of nice to have someone around who appreciated the space. But then came the collaborations. Shawn started showing up with strangers. Guys he worked with, apparently, though I never got any last names. One of them spilled a drink on my blueprints. Another broke a clamp and just shoved it behind a toolbox like I wouldn't notice. They'd take over the space for entire weekends, blasting music, dragging in greasy car parts, and leaving trash everywhere. I'd show up Monday morning to find half my tools misplaced and oil stains on my hardwood workbench. Hardwood, by the way, that I personally spent 3 weekends sanding and sealing. I confronted Shawn a few times. Asked him, nicely at first, if he could at least clean up or maybe limit the guests. He'd always wave me off with a laugh, saying things like, "Come on, man, we're building something here. This is the start of our business." I'd blink and say, "Our business." And he'd just wink like it was some big inside joke. Things came to a head 2 months ago. I came home from work, exhausted, only to find my entire garage driveway full of parked cars again. I had to leave my truck on the street and haul a load of materials by hand. When I got to the workshop, Shawn had set up an actual camera crew. 2 guys with DSLRs were filming while he stood next to my lathe, holding a spark plug and talking about launching the next evolution of American craftsmanship, like he was on Shark Tank. I stepped in and said, "What's going on?" He grinned, mid-monologue, and gestured for the camera to stop. "Dan, this is perfect, bro. I was just telling the guys about our setup." "Our setup?" "Yeah, man. Don't be shy." I already told them how we built this whole thing together. I was too stunned to even respond. "Built it together?" The closest he ever came to building this shop was when he stacked 2 empty paint cans and called it a chair. But I kept it cool. I didn't want to start a scene in front of strangers. I just muttered, "Wrap it up soon," and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. My gut was twisting. I had this nagging feeling that something was about to get worse. And it did. 2 days later, I pulled into the driveway and found a massive banner hanging above the shop entrance. Shawn's custom garage. He'd nailed it into the actual siding of the building. My building. My tools. My name nowhere in sight. I stormed in, and there he was, feet kicked up on my stool, polishing a wrench that wasn't even his. "Shawn," I said slowly, keeping my voice level, "what is this?" He didn't even flinch. Just looked up, shrugged, and said, "It's branding, man. Visual identity. Don't worry, We'll make you co-owner once the money starts rolling in. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch a wall. Instead, I said, you know what? No, you don't get to call this place yours. This is my property. My equipment. You were a guest. Shawn rolled his eyes and leaned back, arms crossed. Relax, you're just the wallet anyway. I'm the face. You need someone with vision. I stood there, frozen. Wallet. That word. It hit me like a slap. Not because it was new, but because it confirmed everything I'd been afraid to admit. He didn't respect me. He never did. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just nodded slowly, turned around, and walked out. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. I pulled receipts, located every invoice, every credit card statement, every serial number I'd registered over the last decade. I drafted a detailed inventory. Then I made a few calls to a friend who worked in small claims legal filings. And by midnight, I had a plan in motion. The next evening, after Shawn and his crew left for the night, I parked a rented van right outside the shop. One by one, I began clearing it out, my tools, my machines, even the wall-mounted pegboards I had installed myself. I worked in silence, gloves on, jaw tight, until the space looked exactly like it did when I first got the keys. Empty. Quiet. Mine. And when I was done, I left one thing behind, a single envelope taped to the door. Inside was the formal cease and desist notice I had filed that morning, along with a bill for unauthorized commercial use of personal property. I was halfway home when I got the first text from him. Dude, what is this? Then another. Where's all the gear? And finally, you're gonna regret this. I didn't reply. Let him panic. Let him see what happens when the wallet finally closes. The next morning, I woke up to 7 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and 1 long, angry email. Shawn's tone had changed fast. The texts that came in overnight started panicked. Bro, we have a shoot scheduled today. Then shifted to accusatory, you stole our equipment. And finally landed at pathetic, can we just talk? Please? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I drove the van to a secure storage facility I'd rented ahead of time. Every item I'd recovered had been logged, photographed, and labeled by me the night before. I even tagged each high-value item with the last 4 digits of the receipt ID, just in case this thing ended up in court. I wasn't just covering my back. I was laying down a paper trail so thick even the most clueless judge wouldn't have to squint. At around 1 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Is this Daniel Caldwell? A sharp voice asked. Yes. Who's this? This is Officer Tran with the County Sheriff's Department. We've received a complaint of property theft filed by a Mr. Shawn Dillard. He claims you removed commercial assets from a shared workspace. I almost laughed out loud. I took a deep breath and kept my voice calm. I see. Well, Officer Tran, I own the property in question, and I can provide full documentation that every piece of equipment removed was purchased and registered under my name. I have receipts, serial numbers, and proof of ownership going back 10 years. There was a pause on the other end. Okay. I'd recommend you forward all of that to our office just to be safe. Already prepared. Where should I send it? Turned out, Shawn had really filed a report. Probably thought the police would scare me into rolling over. But what he hadn't realized was that calling the cops gave me the one thing I hadn't had until then, official documentation of his attempt to claim ownership of my workshop. By 4 p.m., I got an email from Officer Tran stating that the issue appeared to be a civil dispute and was no longer a criminal matter. In other words, Shawn had shot himself in the foot. The silence from him after that was deafening. 2 days went by. Then 3. No texts. No emails. No surprise visits. I assumed he was regrouping, and I was right. On the 4th day, I got a knock at my front door. Not a frantic bang, just a few polite taps. I opened it, and there he was. Shawn, wearing a pressed shirt, probably borrowed, hair slicked back like he was on his way to a job interview. He even brought coffee, my usual order, from the place I liked. He held it out like a peace offering. Hey, man, he started, in the same tone he used when we were teenagers and he broke my Game Boy. Can we talk? I didn't invite him in. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. He got the message. He smiled awkwardly and held the cup out again. I didn't take it. I just wanted to clear the air. Things got out of hand. That whole wallet thing, dude, I was joking. You know that, right? No, Shawn, I said quietly. You weren't. You meant every word. He blinked. I could see the cracks in his charm starting to show. Okay, but look, he continued. This doesn't have to be a war, all right? I get that you were mad, but you really blindsided me. You took everything, like even the clamps. My clamps, I corrected. He sighed and looked down. I had investors lined up. I was building something. You were using my property, my tools, and my name, I said, without asking. And now you want to act like I'm the one who burned the bridge. Shawn's jaw tightened. His eyes darted around, like he was searching for a different script that might work better. I'm asking you for one last chance, he said finally. I'll give you credit. I'll make you a partner. Full 50%. You don't even have to be involved. Just let me use the space and we can split the profits. That's when I realized something important. Shawn didn't want a partnership. He wanted permission. Permission to keep draining my time, my effort, my resources. He thought slapping my name on his chaos would make it legit. I let the silence stretch until it got awkward. Then I said, no. He blinked. No, I'm not interested. I was never your partner. You tried to make a brand off something I built alone, and when I pushed back, you tried to weaponize the law against me. You're done here. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You think you're going to scare me with legal threats and paperwork? I didn't laugh back. I just tilted my head slightly and said, there's more paperwork coming, Shawn. You'll see. I stepped back inside and shut the door without another word. And true to my word, the very next day, I filed a formal trespass notice. Since he had no claim to the property, and I had proof of removal and documentation of the entire dispute, I was well within my rights. The notice was served by a local deputy, just for extra impact. From that moment on, he couldn't legally set foot near the workshop again without risking arrest. But I wasn't done. Shawn still had his little online brand, a half-baked YouTube channel and Instagram page where he'd posted behind-the-scenes clips of his workshop, giving the impression he built everything. So I compiled screenshots, matched them to the timestamps of my removed tools, and submitted takedown notices through every available platform. The pages didn't just lose the posts, they got flagged for impersonation and copyright infringement. Within a week, the channel was gone. He didn't just lose access to my tools. He lost his image. But just when I thought it was over, a letter came in the mail. A formal notice from a startup incubator group claiming Shawn had filed a joint business application using my name as a partner. I stared at the letter, reading the words over and over, and my pulse started to rise. He'd gone behind my back. Again. Only this time, he left a paper trail. I set the letter down on my kitchen table and just stared at it for a while. I wasn't even angry, just stunned. I couldn't believe his audacity. After everything, after being told no, after the police got involved, after I stripped the workshop bare and filed a trespass notice, he still hadn't learned. He didn't just try to use my tools. Now he was trying to use me. The letter was from a mid-tier accelerator group based 2 towns over. It outlined that Shawn Dillard and Daniel Caldwell had submitted a proposal for funding to launch a custom automotive and fabrication brand. It included a rough business plan, a name I'd never heard before, Fraudulent Customs, and, most importantly, a projected inventory list that matched nearly every tool I had removed from the shop. What caught my eye was a line buried near the bottom of the page, initial valuation based on existing equipment and facility access as described by applicant. That's when it hit me. He hadn't just listed me as a partner, he'd listed my tools as his assets. And if that application was approved, he'd be legally misrepresenting my property as company capital. That moved this from a civil spat to something far more serious. I made 2 calls. First was to the accelerator group. I politely explained that I had never authorized any such business application and that my name had been used fraudulently. The man on the other end, a guy named Jeremy, sounded nervous the moment I mentioned the word unauthorized. I offered to send documentation, and he agreed immediately. Within an hour, I'd forwarded copies of the police report, photos of the equipment and storage, the cease and desist notice, and a statement revoking any supposed partnership with Shawn. The second call was to my lawyer friend, Alicia. I hadn't wanted to drag her into this unless things got out of hand, and now they definitely had. She listened carefully while I explained the whole saga, from Shawn first showing up, to the unauthorized use of my shop, to the fake business application. By the end of the call, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Dan, this isn't just messy anymore. This borders on fraud. And if that group gave him money based on misrepresented assets, that's a whole new can of worms for him. Possibly even criminal. That should have made me feel vindicated. It didn't. Not right away. Because what hit me then wasn't satisfaction, it was exhaustion. I was tired. Tired of always trying to be the reasonable one. Tired of giving second chances to someone who treated every olive branch like a receipt. Tired of being dragged down into someone else's chaos just because we shared blood. I tried to handle this quietly. I tried to walk away without torching everything. But Shawn had lit the match himself. Alicia told me we had two options. The first was to send an official letter to the accelerator group requesting the application be rescinded and putting them on notice that I would pursue damages if they allowed my name to be used. The second option? Filing a fraud complaint against Shawn directly and taking this to small claims court or beyond. She said the second route was stronger, since Shawn had signed documents listing my property as part of the shared business assets. It was provable, tangible, and damning. I'll draft both, she said. You decide how far you want to take it. That night, I sat in my workshop, the one I'd spent the last week carefully restoring to the way it was. Every tool back in its place. Every shelf dusted and leveled. It was quiet again. Peaceful. But I couldn't stop thinking about how fast Shawn had managed to twist something sacred into something toxic. I replayed every moment in my head. Him calling it our setup. Him smirking about being the face. That ridiculous banner. The camera crew. The fake business plan. And most of all, the look in his eyes when he said, "You're just the wallet anyway." That's when the shift finally happened. I wasn't tired anymore. I was done. The next morning, I called Alicia back and gave her the green light. "I want it all filed," I said. "Let's make it official." She didn't even hesitate. "You got it." Within the week, the accelerator group confirmed in writing that the application had been rejected and Shawn had been permanently barred from submitting under their program again. But more than that, Alicia had filed the fraud complaint, along with a claim for damages, unauthorized commercial use of personal property, defamation by misrepresentation, and attempted identity fraud. Shawn must have gotten wind of it fast, because the very next day, I got a knock at the door again. This time, he didn't bring coffee. He brought his mother, my Aunt Denise. If you've ever met someone who could guilt-trip the Pope, that's Aunt Denise. She was the kind of woman who could cry on command, smile while insulting you, and still somehow leave with your leftovers. She stood there on my porch in a shawl like she was going to a funeral, dabbing her eyes with a tissue that I'm positive was dry. "Daniel, honey," she said before I could even speak, "we just want to talk. Your family." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Shawn looked like he'd aged 10 years. For once, he wasn't smirking. He stood behind his mother like a scolded child, shifting awkwardly in place. "I have nothing to talk about with either of you," I said. "Don't be like this," Denise continued. "Shawn made some mistakes, but suing your own cousin? Over a misunderstanding? That's just cruel." "Misunderstanding," I said slowly. "He submitted a fake business proposal using my name and my property. That's not a misunderstanding, it's fraud." Denise gasped like I'd just slapped her. "How dare you say that about him?" "I'm not saying it. The documents are. The law is." Her mouth opened again, but I held up a hand. "This conversation is over. I gave him every chance. He chose this. He's not a victim. He's just finally getting what he's earned." And then I looked straight at Shawn. "I was your last lifeline, man. You could have asked for help. Instead, you tried to steal what I built. Now you'll answer for it." I closed the door in their faces. And from the other side, I heard it. Not yelling, not anger, just silence. They had nothing left to say. It took a few weeks for everything to move through the legal process. That's the thing no one tells you about revenge. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't always end with screaming matches or someone driving off into the night. Sometimes, it's slow. It's paperwork and silence and waiting. But that's what makes it clean. That's what makes it real. While I waited, I focused on my life. I'd started working on a new project in the workshop, a small engine rebuild. Nothing fancy, but something that reminded me why I built that space in the first place. Every evening, I'd go out there with a coffee in one hand and a socket wrench in the other, music playing low, and for the first time in a while, I felt like myself again. Meanwhile, Shawn had gone quiet. I checked his social media, something I rarely did before, but now it had turned into a ghost town. His brand pages had vanished. The Instagram filled with overfiltered photos of my shop was gone. The YouTube channel had been scrubbed. His little empire of stolen ideas had crumbled overnight, and he hadn't posted anything in weeks. Then came the court date. It wasn't dramatic. Small claims rarely are. But the facts were clear. I showed up with Alicia and a folder thick enough to stun a buffalo. Receipts, timestamped photos, emails, texts, witness statements, The original police report, even the trespass notice signed and served. I was prepared. Shawn showed up late. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, eyes darting like he was trying to find an exit. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense vibe, asked each of us to explain our side. Alicia handled most of it, laying out how Shawn had misrepresented me in a legal business filing, falsely claimed ownership of my tools, and used my property for commercial gain without consent. She also detailed how the fraudulent application could have caused reputational damage if it had gone through, and why damages were warranted. Shawn's defense? It was just a misunderstanding. I thought Dan was okay with it. We're family. He kept looking at me like I was supposed to step in and say, yeah, he made mistakes, but he's still family. I didn't. I let him squirm. When the judge finally spoke, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Dillard, what you described as a misunderstanding was an act of deception. You misrepresented shared ownership, misused private property, and attempted to benefit from assets that do not belong to you. Based on the evidence presented, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Just like that. Clean. Quiet. Final. The judgment ordered Shawn to pay $12,500 in damages, partly to cover the commercial use of my tools, and partly for the legal costs I incurred because of his fraudulent filings. It wasn't an astronomical sum, but it was enough to hurt. Enough to sting. Enough to remind him that his actions had consequences. He didn't say a word as the judge dismissed the case. Just stood there frozen while I gathered my things and walked out of the courtroom. He didn't follow me. Didn't text me afterward. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I didn't feel a drop of guilt. I'd given him every chance. He buried everyone. A week later, I got the first payment. It was from some prepaid legal account he must have set up to avoid direct contact. It came in small monthly amounts after that. $300 here, $500 there. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the silence. No more knocks on my door. No more guilt-tripping aunts. No more lectures about family from people who only saw me as a resource. Just peace. Long, uninterrupted peace. I didn't tell many people about what happened. A few close friends. One coworker. Most were stunned that I'd gone through with it, but the ones who really knew me understood. This isn't about a workshop, is it? My friend Melissa asked over lunch one day. No, I said. It was about someone treating my time, my work, and my trust like they were nothing, and finally proving they were wrong. And that was it. Life moved on. I used some of the payout to upgrade the shop, got a new router table, better lighting, even splurged on a dust collection system. I started documenting my projects online, not to go viral, but just to connect with people who loved the craft. And funny enough, without even trying, those videos got traction. People liked the authenticity, the detail, the quiet focus of someone doing what they loved without the noise. One day, several months later, I got a message through my new workshop account. Just a short, anonymous comment on one of my engine rebuild videos. Could have been great if we worked together. But you had to burn the bridge. Hope it was worth it. No name. No profile picture. But I knew who it was. I didn't respond. Because by then, I'd realized something. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped carrying people who were never willing to walk it themselves. And from that moment on, I never looked back. I still pass by Aunt Denise's house sometimes when I visit my cousin Lily, Shawn's younger sister, the only one in that side of the family who never treated me like a walking credit card. She told me Shawn moved 2 towns over. Got a job somewhere. Quiet. Off the grid. Probably still licking his wounds. And maybe that's for the best. Because in the end, revenge didn't look like fireworks. It looked like boundaries. It looked like peace. It looked like standing in my workshop, tools in their place, music humming low, and not a single voice around telling me I owed them something. And you know what? That silence was worth every cent.